Hey, hey, hi. I made it here in the nick of time. Almost. Maybe I could have used another 3 minutes. Anyway, I'm here. I set my scheduler up for 11:11 because that's the time I like to get on live, but I didn't have time to, straighten my ruffles or quite finish doing a couple things I was doing. Nonetheless, hi. I want to talk today about humanness, humanity, and the dehumanizing of one another that I'm seeing a lot. I'm looking around for my other glasses. I just got back from walking my dogs. Speaking of dehumanizing, and my dog friends, after getting drugged by them yesterday, and I'll probably talk about that more at a different time, but it's a good example of the kind of fallibility and human experience that I'm talking about. Like, I think so many of us have imperfect experience. So I was at the park with my dogs, was actually feeling good, better than I have in a while. My back has been healing from a fall I had. My dogs were behaving well, everything was going well. And in sort of typical fashion, it feels like then everything went to hell real quick. And clearly I survived. It's all okay. But it was yet another reminder of both how quickly things can shift, and I think how important it is to just be okay with things not being perfect, things going awry, because as much as that sucks when things go awry, or go amiss, you know what I mean? When things don't go the way we were expecting or we wanted them to go, that sucks. But when we spend even more of our energy lamenting that sucks even more. Now, I spent some time crying yesterday, partly because I just had a lot of stress well up in my body after I had a hard fall almost 3 weeks ago, and I've been healing up from that. And yesterday was one of the first days. I think it was the second day that I was out with my back brace and no ibuprofen. The first day that I was feeling good at that. And so then when I fell, there was several layers of stress compounding. Not only was there some pain, luckily not a tremendous amount of pain, but a little bit of discomfort and also just like, I guess, humiliation, or the stress of falling in front of other humans and then being drugged by my dogs. There was the frustration of wanting to be a good leader to these two and feeling like a failure at that. It was frustration at the other human being who had his dog off the leash, which he commonly does at the park. And, his dog is well behaved, except for it came over maybe to try to play. It doesn't really matter. My dogs are not well behaved. I keep them on the leash, but, it was a confrontation. And the only way I knew of to keep his dog from getting hurt was to hang tight onto my dogs. I ended up getting drug face first in the grass for a little bit. Got grass stains on my new jeans. That's some first world problems there. I share all that detail, even after I said I might not, just to demonstrate the kind of like first world problem-y kind of problem it is, and also very human problem, right? I think whether it's with our dogs or our children or our parents or our significant others, so often in life, things will be going a certain way. I mean, maybe they're already going crappily. There's different levels of this. I have certainly experienced many of them. So yesterday was just one of those where I was actually feeling higher and feeling better than I had, not in a long time, but in a little while. And then was just reflecting on that when all of a sudden things went awry. And I went from, really high or fairly high to fairly low, literally on the ground, face down, crying. And then I came home and cried for quite a while. And the reason I'm talking about it right now is when I was reflecting on what I want to say lately, it has to do with the dehumanization that I see going on a lot, especially online. Even in person, though, I don't see that many humans in person anymore. And those few I do, because it's so few and far between, most of the time we're talking about other things. But if I'm around people long enough to just for them to get into the general banter that humans seem to be engaging in lately, and or when I'm in a group of humans where they're doing that banter, it's very disturbing. I mean, that might be hyperbolic. It's not always very fairly disturbing, and or just I notice that it's these same patterns, and the pattern is blame and shame and like small thinking, victim mentality. Yeah, it's a strange kind of, I consider myself a nonconformist, and my fellow nonconformist friends seem to be all clicking up on this. I don't watch television anymore, so I don't know which channel they're tuning into, and I don't know if it matters. To me, it seems like all the same program of blame and shame and hate and distraction from our true potential. This constant labeling and dehumanizing, really. So it's constant. So what sparked conversation, besides me falling down yesterday and getting drugged by my dogs, it was a post by let's call him an associate, friend of friends, a person I actually had sex with a couple times long ago in a former life, which is why probably why it struck me in a particular way when he, he's happily married, and I haven't seen him in years in person, and we haven't hung out in a friendly way in a very, very long time, decades. So context on it, but he posted something like so many people are posting on Facebook, and in this case, insults toward the president, and then it was a request, and I often fall for these. They're posed as, it was even phrased, this is a genuine question, or I'm genuinely curious, or that kind of plea often gets me in my gullibility. And I answered before I realized, oh, it wasn't a genuine question. It was a request for permission to dehumanize the first lady as he was dehumanizing the president. And I understand when people are celebrities and politicians and police officers, we expect a higher level from the people that we hold up on a pedestal. And so they are more subject to dehumanization when they show their fallibility as humans. I do understand that. I don't really agree with it, but I see it commonly. And so, it seems to be the consensus seems to be that is the way that humans should act. I find that really gross, really appalling, frankly. I have a hard time with it. When I was growing up, we were told stories of like the witch burnings and people being stoned to death and all these brutal ways that humans have acted toward other humans throughout our history. And it was taught as if that's something that we've grown past, and as if something that's, that we all would agree we don't want to cultivate. And yet, what I've seen lately is this, like, it happens on all the sides. I say all the sides. I don't really have perspective on all the sides. I used to be, I've been a registered Democrat at times, not a diehard Democrat like my mother is and my grandfather was. And, I've had friends on both sides of the aisles, as they say. I used to lean more like Green Party and Independent Party, and probably still, if you forced me to put myself, label myself, would have to be independent, probably. although I'm aware that's not really a party these days. Believe me. Point being, I'm not coming from a partisan place on this, but I do recognize that I have a bit of a skewed partisan perspective, because more than the majority, or the majority of my friends and family and circles have been Democratic leaning. And so what I've seen, so it's not that I don't have some right leaning circle friends as well. In fact, I was like raised by bikers at one point. They were probably more right leaning. I don't know, but I didn't, they didn't talk about politics really. They did. This was in the 1980s. They did talk about the New World Order and some of the stuff that was getting set up that really seems to be playing out now on a global political scale. So that aside, I'm just acknowledging that my perspective is skewed. And so that could be the reason that it seems like a lot of Democrats who I used to respect as people who would vote for the underdog, so to speak, who were in favor of more diversity, of more nonconformity, less conformity, or the double negative there. But, I used to feel like they were more on my side in my own tendency to be a nonconformist, I could say. And I don't feel that way lately. For several years now, really since the pandemic, that just smacked me hard. Like people that I really thought, I was just shocked at how people that were close to me reacted to that, and favored, lockdowns, favored distancing, favored forced vaccines, things that to me were just appalling. So I don't want to go down that rabbit hole too far, but back to this post that I saw was from one of those people who was, more of a former circle of friends, I suppose, and definitely more Democratic leaning. And the rant, which has become an all too familiar rant to justify a slew of nasty name calling, and I understand it feels justified. To me, it's not about, is the dehumanizing justifiable. In fact, I think the more air quotes justifiable dehumanizing someone seems to be, the more of an opportunity is there to really examine ourselves. And as the saying goes, let she who cast the first, or let she without sin cast the first stone. I think that was how the saying goes. I effed it up there, but the point being, I think when we're tempted to dehumanize someone else and start to find ourselves wanting to call them names, and I've been there, probably be there again. I've been there a lot, my fair share for sure. I think though that's an opportunity to examine, how do I want to be? What's the kind of person I want to be? And it's not the kind of person that blindly hates. It's not the kind of person that allows myself to be reduced to name calling and dehumanizing others, because I am not free from sin, as the saying goes. I say that tongue in cheek with a lot of grains of salt, but directionally it's very, very true for me that and the reason I mentioned earlier my previous experience with this person who posted that more recent post. Of course, there have been many of these, but this one is fresh in my mind, so I thought I would talk about it. And it has a little bit of this spin on it where I have this past history with this person. So I know he's not free from sin. I know he has objectified women, me, personally, more than once. And I know he has acted in ways that he's probably not proud of, as most of us have. And so I haven't said any of this publicly, and I'm not going to say his name, and he will probably never see this. If he does, he'll know who I'm talking about probably. And that's good. But the point isn't to single out a single person. The point is really about how we are all having this opportunity all the time, right? To respond to someone else dehumanizing us, or someone else in a way that then dehumanizes them, that then ends up dehumanizing us. It's this reverberative mirror kind of process where we all end up lower, where we all end up, as the saying goes, an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind, right? Where we end up all acting more like the kind of person we don't want to act like, and less like the kind of person we do want to act like. And this particular person, and most, if not all of us that I know of, does want to be a stand-up person. The reason he had framed it as like asking for permission from the masses to, objectify or dehumanize the First Lady is because he was pointing out that he considers himself, a protector of women and children, and he wants to be that kind of upstanding citizen. And again, I think most of us do most of the time. And so I would ask you and me and him, if I get the convenient opportunity, or the opportunity that seems like it won't just create more bad feelings and resistance, because that's often what trying to talk about these things does create. But I would invite us all to pause when we find ourselves wanting to call someone else names that are dehumanizing, or ourselves names that are dehumanizing, regardless of how much they might, air quotes, deserve it, how justified it might feel, how righteous it might make us feel, how much the masses around us might cheer and agree. Think about, again, the witch trials and stonings and so many acts of brutality that masses have engaged in really disgusting behavior around, because they're looking to their neighbors, and when their neighbors act in that dehumanizing way, and it feels good to be angry, it feels good to be righteous, but it doesn't get us to a better system. It doesn't get us to being the type of people that we want to be. It gets us to spiraling into the pit of despair. It gets us to becoming more of exactly what we don't want to be. I think we become what we focus on. And when we focus on what we don't like, when we focus on what we hate, we start to become what we hate. And right now, there's certainly a lot of hate being cultivated and profited on. Distraction, hate. So again, I invite you and all of us to remember to exhale, remember to pause, remember that we are all human beings in this together, and none of us is perfect. Being a leader is a really tough job. I am not very good at it. I'm having a hard time even leading my dogs, so I have a fair amount of empathy for those who seem to be doing a real shitty job of it. I actually think I definitely couldn't do a better job than any of them are doing, even the worst of them. So if you think you could, then get on it, my friend. Go to it. I welcome that. I do think we need, good leadership. I do think there's lots of room for improvement. I'm not saying there isn't. I'm just saying I don't think it helps to dehumanize one another. And when we dehumanize someone else, we end up dehumanizing ourselves by proxy. So that's what I have to say about that. I'd love to know your thoughts and comments if you have any. I am not sure how these live streams work with regard to getting a replay. I might play with a little editing of them or something. We'll see. But in any case, happy February 4th. We made it through another full moon. We're on into another month. 2026 is grinding away. So try to stay human. Try to remember to breathe and smile. And I'll be seeing you soon. Ciao for now. Bye.